Welcome to this exciting episode of Positive Leadership Podcast. Today, we are joined by a trailblazer in the field of artificial emotional intelligence, a scientist, an entrepreneur, an advocate for human-centered AI. Our guest has dedicated her career to making technology more attuned to human emotions. She co-founded Affectiva, pioneered AI-powered emotion recognition, and is now leading Blue Tulip, a venture fund investing in ethical and human-centric AI solutions. Her journey from Cairo to Cambridge to Boston and beyond has been marked by innovation, impact, resilience, and a strong commitment to ensuring AI serves humanity. Rana, a warm welcome and a reconnect after a few years post-COVID to this Positive Leadership Podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me back, I guess.
So
great
Rana,
to see you again.
Yes, great to see you. So Rana, let me start with where I love to start, which is, your roots. So you grew up in what could be described as one of the most geeky families in Egypt. That's my statement, not yours. Your father was a computer science professor, and your mom was among the first female programmers in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So Rana, growing up in Cairo, what aspect of your childhood and family environment truly shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I love how you called us the one of the geekiest family in Egypt. I'm going to use that moving forward. So my parents met. My dad actually taught COBOL programming, which is, it's now an obsolete programming language. And my mom was one of the very first women to sign up to take his class, and that's how they met. So we grew up surrounded by technology, and not only as consumers of technology, but my dad always made a point to have us kind of break it apart and really understand how it works. And to me, I just always thought of technology as a way to bring people together, not divide people. And that's definitely been a common thread throughout my career, how to use technology to make us more human, not less human.
What about the values of your family, of your dad, your mom, or siblings and cousins, or the broad family back in Egypt? What did that mean to you?
Yeah, I also think so. I have two younger sisters, and one of my earliest kind of not so great memories, I would say, was overhearing my uncle. My parents really invested in our education.
Yes.
And I really do attribute that investment to my and my sister's success because we're lifelong learners, and my parents instilled that love of learning in us from a very young age. And it was an investment, right? Sometimes it really stretched their budgets too thin to invest in our education. And once when I was 8, I overheard my uncle tell my dad, "Why are you spending so much money on these girls? They're just going to end up being housewives anyway."
Wow.
Right. And my dad, to his credit, my parents, to their credit, they basically doubled down on just investing both in our classroom experiences. We went to like really amazing schools, but also in the summers, we traveled the world. We spent a lot of time, just visiting different cultures. And
in the UK, right? So maybe, or some other countries, yeah.
We did the UK. We did a lot of France. My parents loved France, actually.
Okay. Which place in France?
Belgium. We did Paris. We did Nice. We did Monte Carlo, Monaco.
All the best spots. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. So, and to this day, some of these values I've instilled in my kids. We're as a family, we're lifelong learners. We love to travel. We love to connect with people. We're global citizens of the world, and my parents instilled that in us.
So listening to you, Rana, it looks like your dad, your mom are really true role models for you in terms of inclusion, in terms also of commitment, I'm sure, to hard work and to education.
Oh, yeah.
Since the early days. I know that you've often also discussed how your Muslim faith, right, and cultural identity played a very important role in your journey, especially in the context, again, of forging a path in tech and academia. So how have your religious and cultural values influenced both your personal but also your professional worldview as of today?
Yeah, I think there are core values in Islam in particular, but in any religion, honestly, that are around generosity, right? This culture and core value of giving and paying it forward. That's important. Having faith, whatever that faith is so important. I always think of both my journey as an academic, but then also an entrepreneur. And even now with, raising my fund, it's an entrepreneurial journey, right? And you have to have faith. You have to have this conviction and deep belief in something that you're building, and almost embark on the journey without really knowing what the outcome is going to look like. And that kind of strong groundedness is, I think is something that I carry along with me, from my religion.
Still today, yes.
Absolutely. So generosity and faith are the two things that come to mind.
Yeah, I think it would be great later on again, as we have more discussions about AI, Rana, to talk about maybe AI and spirituality. What does it mean? So hold on that food, but it'd be just to get you prepared for that. So talk about AI. In AI and emotion sensing technology, navigating ethical gray areas is critical. And I know that you've been working a lot on that, both at college and after that. So what are the core principles you inherited again from your upbringing that help you navigate such challenges today, both as an entrepreneur, as an investor?
Yeah, I come back to my parents, actually. My dad and both my parents, but my dad really has a very, very, very strong sense of integrity. And I've seen that put in practice like over and over again, sometimes kind of almost to an extreme, right? Like he's a stickler for integrity. And I've brought that to my everyday life, but also my professional life, right? How I think about business decisions, and it's always putting integrity, before profit, and I've carried that with me. So, for example, at my company Affectiva, and we're going to get to that, with the technology we were building at the time, there were so many use cases, and some in particular kind of really infringed on people's privacy. So one of the use cases was, can we deploy this technology for lie detection and deception detection and surveillance? And we would have probably, as a company, made gobs and gobs and gobs of money by doubling down on that use case. But it was not in line with why we started the company. And I believe that it had more potential to hurt people than do good in the world. And so we said, no, we turned down the money. And I still stand by that, and so I think it's important to really think about the broader, marry profit and purpose. I am all about profit, but it's important to think about purpose as well and marry the two.
So 2 P's.
Yeah, the 2 P's.
Yes,
I love
profit
that.
and purpose. We often talk about the bottom line, right? People, profit, and the planet, but you're actually talking about the purpose and the people and the profit, which I think makes tons of sense to me. Just doubling down a little bit on integrity, because I think you gave a great example, which I love. What would be what I'm calling your non-negotiables, Rana, in business and in life? What are Rana's non-negotiables?
That's
as you peel the integrity onion, right? Because it's, what does it mean for you, right? In terms of making some hard decisions in your life, professionally and personally, to live by your standards and your expectations with other people.
Yeah. Non-negotiable is definitely, it's one level of integrity. It's kind of being honest and being honest.
Yes.
I think that's non-negotiable. I think another one, I don't know why that's coming up top of mind for me, is empathy, is having empathy, for others. I think that's non-negotiable.
So you need to engage with people with whom you feel that empathy and vice versa. There's a reciprocity in terms of empathy as well.
Correct, and they have empathy for others, right? They can put themselves in other people's shoes and see where others are coming from, as opposed to otherizing the others. I think empathy is important. What's another non-negotiable? I think the work hard ethic.
Hard ethics, right? Yes.
People who. Yeah. People who like really put the effort in. Like I don't think I'd do well with like slackers. And I don't think I can be a slacker, and I don't think I would do well with the slackers.
I think you're not a slacker for sure. That's a great list, Rana. I think it's great to click on that, because I think, as we'll discuss later, some of the choices you're making on technology, on the founders, on entrepreneurs, on solutions for human-centered AI, I think a lot of those principles should apply, I think, in such choices as well. So let's go back to your life, if you don't mind. And again, I know that at one point you made a pivotal shift, right? You got married as well, and you pursued a PhD in computer science at the University of Cambridge. And later on, you completed a postdoc at MIT. So a question, I know you talk about that in some other episodes, as a young married Muslim engineer living far away from home, how do you navigate life in such different cultural environment and far away from your husband as well and your family? Not easy, I can imagine. And again, a few years ago, not in 2025.
Yeah, that was, when I moved to Cambridge University to start my PhD, I was newlywed, like I was a new bride, and it was my first experience living away from home. And it was definitely tough in the sense that I felt quite lonely a lot of the times.
Yes.
It was a very new environment. It was also right after September 11th.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the world was really shaken.
Oh, yeah.
Rightly so. And I, at the time, used to wear the hijab, so I was very visibly Muslim, and my parents and my, husband at the time were very afraid for my safety. And I just remember, back to kind of empathy, I had empathy for other people. I'm like, I can see why they would be worried. So here I am. I'm going to show up with my biggest smile. It was my peace offering. Like literally, I would just that was how I disarmed people.
Smile.
Smile, right? And then people would often smile back. It's very simple. It worked. So I led with humanity, I guess. And
it helped you navigate any particular challenges that you had to deal with, which were hard for you emotionally as well during that time?
Honestly, thankfully, I was never kind of bullied or, felt discriminated against. Obviously, at the lab, I was one of the very few women PhD students at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, there were like maybe 120 of us in the lab and like 5 women. So there were very few of us. But I always, when I mentor young women early in their careers, I often say, that's a superpower too, because it's easy to stand out if you're doing something amazing.
Yes, for sure.
So I saw the good in it, I guess.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the moments in your life that shaped you. This is what one of my guests called the crucible moment. That's Bill George. Don't know if you know Bill George. Used to be the CEO of Medtronic a number of years ago. And he wrote an excellent book called The True North.
Yes,
and he talks
I love
about
that book, by the way.
You love the book? Great. It's a great reading for all listeners. And he talks about those crucible moments. So can you recall a couple of those crucible moments from your years, both in the UK or in the US afterwards, that fundamentally shaped your outlook, your career, and who you are today?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. There's definitely a few moments. I think the toughest moment for me was, post my PhD, I had started my company and I was commuting back and forth between Boston and Cairo. And this was before, we all had Zoom and hybrid was acceptable.
Yes.
And so I was just spending a lot of time on planes and really not present in my life. I was not present with my family. I had 2 young kids at the time. Who were based in Cairo, and I sometimes would take one of the kids with me on my trips to Boston, and it was just very messy.
Yes.
And my marriage fell apart during that time. It was also the same year that the Egyptian revolution was happening. It was just a lot of external and internal turmoil.
Yes.
And basically, at the time, he was still my husband, but we were separating. We made the decision that it made more sense for me to move the kids and myself to Boston, where, my company was headquartered. We had spun out of MIT. And everybody I knew, my parents, my in-laws, even my best friend said, "You're crazy. You are going to fail. You're going to move to Boston on your own with these 2 young kids, and they're going to be miserable. You're going to fail. You will the company will fail." It was all fail. And I wrote in my journal, I journal every day.
Yeah. We'll talk about your journal as well.
Yeah. and I wrote, "I am so afraid." And it was just all fear driven.
Of course.
But I went ahead and I did it anyway. And, we did well. Thank goodness. I feel very blessed. My kids are amazing. They're kind people. They're, they work hard. They lifelong learners. They're all the core values. They embody our core values as a family. And I'm just I feel, and started the company, exited the company onto like new adventures. So I feel very blessed. But that moment, I often think it was like such a fork road.
Of course.
Right? Imagine if I had stayed in Cairo. I'm sure it would have been an amazing life too, but a very different life, another life.
Yes. No, it's thanks for sharing that story, Rana. And I guess that beyond journaling, you must have built some particular superpowers or particular practices that got you to build that self-resiliency, because being away from the broad family, just with your kids, taking care of your career and your family and kids, separating, that's a lot for a young woman. So what else, and what kind of, where did you find the energy in yourself, or from the outside maybe, right? To look at your true north, basically, and to think about the way forward for you, for your kids, and really build a new Rana that was on her way.
Yeah, I think it goes back to this faith, just knowing that.
Faith
I tell
in
my
yourself.
kids, faith that it will work out. I always tell my kids that things happen for a reason, and you might have no idea what the reason is right now because it looks terrible and awful, but you will look back someday and you will say, you know what? Because this terrible thing happened, all these amazing things came after that. And I really believe that. Sometimes it's really hard to internalize that in the moment, but I fundamentally believe that. And I always came back to that. Yeah. And then my kids, I knew I had to show up for these kids. So there was no slacking. Yeah. Every morning. Yeah.
And every night. Yeah. No, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing in that story, Rana. Let's continue, I think, with your journey a bit. For your journey took you again from Cairo, as I said, to Cambridge and MIT, where you enter spaces often dominated, as you say, by probably both male, but also Western perspectives. In a very recent episode will be released when your episode will be released, actually, I talk with Professor Doreen Shanaz, who speaks about caucasity. Caucasity is really this combo of audacity and courage as well together. And it's really about Caucasian and audacity, sorry to correct that. And it's really about the confidence and entitlement that often come with Western privilege. That's what she says, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as someone originated from the global South, did you ever feel that you had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously in these environments? And how did you navigate that?
Oh, yes. Like still, honestly,
Still
actually,
today.
still today. I feel like, I don't know if it's twice as hard. Maybe it's more, honestly.
Yeah.
It manifests everywhere, and especially, again, as I'm embarking on this new adventure of starting a fund and starting a new venture firm.
Yes.
I'm having to raise capital, and it's not easy. It's not easy. You have to do more work to prove yourself, which is fine.
But so you would agree with that? It's actually much harder for people coming also from what is called today the global South to basically get access to the same resources and support that others get.
I also think I've really. This is actually one of the reasons why I'm also doing the fund.
Yes.
AI presents massive economic opportunity, but we don't all have equal access to it. A lot of people are kind of shut out of this opportunity, whether as founders or even as investors. And I looked at the cap table of the top 50 AI companies, and it's all the same investors investing in the same founders who then sell their companies and they become the invest. And it's all the same closed group of people. And I was like, I want to break that. I want to bring in people who you often don't see represented in these spaces.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just access to these networks, and we have to create. Yeah.
And I think we'll a few more topics to discuss later as we talk about Blue Tulip. It would be great to understand the way you think about reaching out outside of the US, where there's so much happening already in terms of AI innovation, to maybe tap into some other talents, reservoirs, and diverse people from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe. Don't know, but it would be
absolutely.
It would be interesting to see the way you are able to do that. I think in an industry where there's kind of a closed box in a way, because there's so much talent there for sure. That why do we need to go beyond that? So more to come. So
absolutely.
MIT, you helped establish the Autism and Communication Technology Initiative and contribute to the development of emotion reading wearable glasses. You built one of the very first emotionally intelligent machines, a system that can identify people's facial expressions and map that into a number of cognitive emotional states. And this provided the impetus for starting Affectiva in 2009 as a spin-off from MIT Media Lab. And you created the company, I think, with Dr. Rosalind Picard to bring emotional intelligence to technology and change the way people make decisions by incorporating emotional data. So what was the defining moment that made you realize that merging technology with human emotions was your true calling personally?
That brings us back to my PhD days, because when I first got to Cambridge and I was feeling lonely and it was my first experience away from home, I would literally sit down on my machine and start. At the time, the messaging app was called ICQ.
I remember that.
And of your listeners who remember that.
Yes.
And sometimes I would literally be in tears, literally so homesick and just so down. And all I could send was a sad emoji face.
Yes.
And I felt like the richness of our emotional experiences as humans was just reduced to this very rudimentary communication language, right?
Yes.
And that sparked the idea. I was like, wow, we are focused so much on the IQ of technology and AI, and nobody's really thinking about the EQ.
Indeed.
And of course, right, in our human-to-human connection and communication, actually over 90% of how we communicate is nonverbal. It's facial expressions, it's hand
Absolutely.
gestures, right? Vocal intonation, you're nodding your head kind of in agreement. And this all really gets lost, when it's computer mediated. And
Yes.
so I wanted to apply machine learning and computer vision to, ironically kind of quantify these emotional experiences that we have. And that was the spark for the idea. I still think it's extremely needed and relevant, especially in the age of AI today, with AI becoming so ubiquitous. So it's still relevant.
No, it is super relevant. Actually, again, one of my guests, probably last year, actually, is her name is Guy Laclara-Kessou. She's a French PhD in positive psychology. She's also an artist. She's also a social entrepreneur. She's a United Nations activist as well. She's doing so many things. And she and I had a wonderful discussion about facial expressions, and because she's done also theater to talk about some of the drama that happened in Rwanda and some of those countries and genocides, and help and use theater as a therapy for women. And because of that, she's worked so much on the body expressions, but also, of course, the mind. And so I'm fascinated about the way, it's a question to you, Rana, how AI can accurately capture these very human nuances on our faces that we can see on YouTube right now between you and I. And how do you ensure that the technology interpret them ethically, respectfully, and with integrity, using your values and words, right? How do we do that, technology and AI?
Oh, absolutely. That was a big part of, my PhD and postdoc work at MIT. And then later when we started the company, it's not easy. A lot of people, I remember in the very first days of Affectiva, when we spun out, they would say, like, how tough is how hard is this problem anyway? If a person's smiling, it's smile. And actually, we have about 22 different facial muscles, and they combine to create thousands of potential expressions. And then to map these expressions to meaning requires a lot of context, understanding the person, marrying it with other modalities, like what you're saying. So it's a very complex problem. And you're right, it's so easy to get biased. I remember, can I share a story about how we accidentally built bias in ours? We were training our machine learning algorithm with facial expressions from all over the world. But we had one model basically that represented, a smile. And one of our biggest clients was actually a company based in China. And they said, your algorithm doesn't work because it just shows a flat line all the time. And so we had to look at all the data. And it turns out Chinese people smile, but the magnitude of the smile is a little different than like Egyptian Rana smiling, right? But we were comparing everybody on the same baseline. And so the algorithm was, and so we started to create like versions of the model that incorporated kind of different facial compositions, different areas of the world, gender, there's gender differences in how we express emotion. So it is so important to be intentional and thoughtful about kind of data and algorithmic bias. I think it's also really important to respect people's privacy. So to this day, we have never collected any piece of data without people knowing that it's being collected.
Super important.
Clear consent.
It's really a follow-up question for you, Rana, because I'm fascinated about, of course, all the big AI LLMs coming up from US, from China, from Europe now. And there's a big question in my mind, which I think many people, think about, which is in terms of the training, indeed, when it comes again to the people cultures, the people emotions, particularly in the context of Affectiva or similar type of companies, how do we make sure that we truly train all the voices of the world, which is a big task, by the way, as opposed to, well, overexpose some voices from some places in the world that, we know where it's coming, which do not represent the world. And how confident do you feel about, without naming the companies, the tech industry is actually doing that?
Yeah, what did you call it? Caucasity? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another example of where this is happening. One of the things that I'm most excited about in AI is that the barrier to entry is actually is not that high. And I'm excited about sovereign AI. I believe that different countries, different organizations should be investing in their own models that capture their core values, their cultures, their nuances, their language. And so I think that's great. And I think these are endeavors that sovereigns should really double down on. And we're seeing that, in some parts of the Middle East, obviously in Europe, France is kind of really leading there too.
Yeah. So coming back to Affectiva, you had a significant impact in some industries, particularly I think the auto industry, I believe, where AI, again, emotion AI is used to drive actually monitoring systems. So could you share an example, auto industry or another industry, where you could see AI making a difference, either in terms of safety, in terms of, I don't know, comfort for the drivers, the passengers, so that our listeners understand actually the way it works for real people in real cars going somewhere?
You broke up for a bit. I don't know if that's me, but anyway, you're back. Yeah, happy to share an example from the automotive industry. We started to get approached by big automotive companies in about 2018, and they wanted to use our technology in the car. And we were like, what's the use case, right? And basically imagine like a camera sensor in the vehicle that can look at the driver, but also some passengers and the passengers in the vehicle and detect things like drowsiness, right? Drowsiness is a very like visual signal. I'm actually showing how you would look like your eyes are closed, your head is bobbing. It's very easy to detect that with computer vision and actually detect early stages of drowsiness before it's too late to intervene. Another one is texting while driving. Again, when you're texting, your eyes are not on the road. Sometimes your hands are not on the wheel. We can see that there's an object in your hand. Very easy things to detect using computer vision. And then you can imagine a vehicle intervening, especially if it's a semi-autonomous vehicle. It can say, you know what, Rana, you're so distracted right now, or you're so tired right now. I will take over driving for the next 5-10 minutes while you get your act together. And then I'll give you control back. And then we actually started expanding the aperture, and we look at other passengers in the vehicle to detect things like, what is the sentiment inside the car? Are people comfortable? Is there, this is another important use case. We can detect if there's a car seat in the car, and if there's a child, and about 50 in the US, I don't know the numbers globally, but in the US, about 50 infants get forgotten in the car every year, and they die of a heat stroke. So easy to detect with AI, right?
Yeah. So all the scenarios, you've been able to tackle them through that AI intelligence in the car. So Rana, AI continues to advance pretty fast when it comes to speech, vision, body motions that we discuss. And I had the opportunity to host Daniel Goleman, the famous author of Emotional Intelligence, again last year, who defines as the 4 domains of emotional intelligence. As a reminder to all of us, number 1 is self-awareness. Number 2 is self-management. Number 3 is social awareness. And number 4 is relationship management. So my question, Rana, is where do you see AI making the biggest progress in these 4 areas? And could you share some real-world example of that technology, either with some startups, Affectiva, or others you've seen, either, again, in that self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, or relationship management?
Ah, well, I'm going to go with the self-awareness.
Yep.
Although I actually would love to also talk about relationship management, because I think there's a
Great.
huge opportunity there. So let's tackle both. I think
Yep.
one of the biggest opportunities or applications of AI, and including emotion AI, so it's both generative AI and predictive AI and emotion AI, is in mental health. And it's an area I'm extremely passionate about. So unfortunately, the gold standard in mental health today is still a survey. So you get asked on a scale from 1 to 10, how stressed are you? How depressed are you? How suicidal are you? And the data is not at all longitudinal. It's not objective. It's very hard to act on it and help the patient, you know?
Yes.
Whereas if you apply AI, like imagine I used to serve on a board of a company called Videra Health, and they, their slogan was to crack the black box open. So between doctors' visits, you have an app. It asks you a few questions with video, and then it takes the voice, what you said, your facial expressions, and it looks for red flags, right? If there are red flags, maybe your demeanor is very kind of down, or you say words that are worrisome. If everything's fine, it's great. It just gives you a thumbs up. But if it senses these red flags, it actually escalates it to a human clinician that gets to check in on you. And they've done a lot of work with young adolescents, and they've actually saved young people's lives by intervening at the right moment.
Wonderful.
I'm also an investor in a company called Happy Pillar, and they do that kind of behavioral health coaching for parents with young children. So again, very powerful. So I believe that applying AI and data, right, multimodal data and AI to help people just be emotionally and mentally healthier, I think that's extremely promising and powerful. It's a great use case for AI.
Love it. And I think there's potential to do so much. Give it again a mental state of the world as well, including youth and many more, actually, whatever is the age. So huge potential. So what about relationship management? Because I think you call that one out as well.
Yeah. We track a lot of people anyway, not everybody, but a lot of people track their sleep, their physical fitness. I
do that with my ring.
Your ring, yeah.
Aura ring for a few years. You've got...
I got Whoop, which is Aura's competitor. But we don't track arguably the most important aspect of our lives, which is our relationships. We haven't figured out a way to track the health of our relationships. And so imagine
that's a bit scary, but keep going.
Well, imagine if you had a way to track, I keep envisioning like a visual, like the Whoop or Aura gives you like resilience and readiness and da-da-da. The Whoop gives you recovery, and you can be red or yellow or green, right? Imagine if you could do that with your relationships, and it could say, okay, everything's green, you're good, or a little bit yellow, you need to pay attention, show a little bit love. And I think that would be really powerful. And the data could be, I recently interviewed the CEO of the Gottman's Institute. Julie and John Gottman have been doing family and couples counseling for over 30 years. But they've now created what's called the Love Lab. Initially, they would bring couples in, and they, strap them with sensors and put video cameras on them. But now they can do it virtually. Like they can have a couples therapy session on Zoom and record all of the nonverbal cues, right? And then say, we saw like this upper lip razor, which is a signal of contempt, not good. You guys need to talk, or like, they can coach people through some of these tough challenges. I think that's really interesting. You could also imagine a chat, like open AI, like ChatGPT, right? You can imagine one that does it for couples, right? And it can actually do like couples counseling. I think that would be really interesting. So I think that's a new and untapped area for AI.
No, that's fascinating. No, that's fascinating. I was saying spontaneously scary, maybe, depending, of course, on the way you enable and empower people to use such technology between rich relationships. Again, what are the principles, integrity,
Totally.
respect,
Trust.
privacy, to allow people to do that or not? Is it more of a proactive action that someone is going to raise their hand saying, I need some help? So I'd love to be able, in full transparency with my relationship, by the way, as well, to have
Right.
this additional perspective for AI of what could be maybe challenging in a relationship moving forward. Then I was just thinking loudly, maybe in our professional relationships, we met a few times, Rana, you and I, looking at the emails we exchanged, checking the videos we had on Teams and today on Riverside, and saying, oh, that's great, and this sounds good, promising, as Rana, JP kind of connected well, and maybe this question, she was less, is that right? This is the way it will work?
Yeah, or yeah. I mean, in actually, I hadn't thought of that in professional relationships too, but
yeah,
right,
could
as
be.
managers, right?
Oh, that's a
Managers,
big use case. I can tell you, having managed a bunch of
right?
people for 40 years, it's a huge question in many organizations at scale. So building on that, maybe, and thank you for, I think it's super interesting the way you elevated two of those four dimensions from Goldman as a framework. I think it's an interesting reference I found myself, at least. So we've been recently, of course, last few years, seeing a surge in all kind of shapes or form of AI companions, right? I'm thinking about AI, Inflection AI with Spy from my friend Mustafa Suleiman, that I'm sure you know. And
Yep.
but also, in a previous episode 2 years ago with one of the founders of positive psychology, a young man who is in his 80s, Martin Seligman, is
Oh,
actually
wow.
using
Yeah.
a Chinese AI chatbot called Ask Martin. We're supporting him to respond to tons of questions he's getting from across the world on his books, on his coaching, almost like as a therapist. So, what do you see as the next frontiers of, again, AI emotional intelligence? And where do you expect in the coming years to have the most meaningful positive impact in society at scale? You mentioned already a couple of areas, but if you broaden your vision, what is the big moonshot? What is the big dream you have right on that?
Ooh. Okay. There's a lot there.
I know.
I mean, I think the biggest potential for AI is to really democratize access to health, learning, connectedness, knowledge, wealth, right? So democratizing access to stuff that
Yes.
makes us better humans and unlocks human potential. And so these are definitely areas where I think they're ripe for innovation. We're going to see a lot of progress there. But back to the Ask Martin use case, the AI kind of the virtual, this is like the virtual human economy. How can you create a digital or an AI clone of yourself that allows you to encapsulate your ideas, your brain trust, and monetize that? And
Yes.
and also scale your impact, right? Because how many people can you really talk to in a day, and how many people can you coach or mentor? But if you'd still want to do that because it's also fulfilling and it's your craft and whatnot, but what if you could scale that by allowing your digital AI twin to go off and do that to millions of people worldwide? I think that's really powerful. And there's a number of startups that are working in this space. One I'm actually trying right now. It's called Wisely, and they took my book, they ingested my book and my podcast interviews and a few of the articles I've written, and you can now ask Rana all sorts of questions. Yeah. I'm not monetizing it yet, but I'm curious, right? But I'm curious to see how is it going to answer kind of questions. Is if we gave it the same set of questions you asked me, JP, on this interview, we should test that and see how it responds, right? It
could be kind of mind blowing again in the right hands, because you could argue, taking another perspective, and I'm an optimist, by the way, but hey, if this being used in the hands of, let's say, someone who is an autocrat in any given country in the world, where you've got some rogue countries, crazy guys we see from time to time. I'm not even calling them out, but everyone will have his own list.
You know who you are, right?
Yeah, you know you are. Ask
or not, right?
And this person, this leader, is using that to basically, take control of the minds of millions of people in the country that he leads. That could be pretty damaging as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, I agree. I think there are multiple ways this could go really bad for humanity. And one way, even if we think of our own like digital twins, if we don't have full control on what these things are saying,
right,
that could be really dangerous, right? So in the wrong hands, they can make me say whatever, something I would never ever say. Like that would be not great. Yeah. And so trust and control is really important. And of course, there's a little bit of tension between control and autonomy, because you want these things to be autonomous, but I still want to retain control over what it can say on my behalf or act on my behalf.
Yes. So I think it's a great segue, Rana. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you wanted to keep going. But it's a great segue into the ethical discussion. I know you had a deep conversation recently with a former colleague and friend of mine, Eric Horvitz, right? Microsoft Chief Scientific Officer, who really, for listeners, is the person who set up the Microsoft Ethics Committee, we call either Microsoft, which is the way he and the Microsoft team has defined some core principles to basically run the AI models, the products, innovation flowing through our platform, through the platform, our customers. And it's about fairness, reliability, safety, privacy, inclusion, transparency, and accountability, for sure. So what is your own reference framework, Rana, if I may? You kind of embrace the same framework Eric has been shaping.
Eric is amazing. Yeah.
And as emotional AI advances, what are the boundaries? We are just discussing this, awful kind of use case potentially could happen in the world. What are the boundaries, guidelines, and technology guardrails that should be put in place, you think, to avoid such scenarios?
I like to simplify it into two buckets: the ethical development and then the ethical deployment of AI. Okay. So on the development side, the main considerations are about mitigating data and algorithmic bias, really like being intentional across the whole machine learning pipeline, everything from how we get the data, where we get the data from, what does it look like, all the way to these models and how we test them and really ensure that there is no accidental. A lot of bias is often accidentally built in, but we got to be able to be intentional about mitigating that. So that's on the development side.
Yep.
On the deployment side, the core principles include things like opt-in and consent. People always should have the opportunity to opt in. I also think there needs to be transparency around, often our opt-ins are very buried in legalese and most people don't read it or don't understand it. At Affectiva, we actually, in addition to the legalese, because we were required to do that, we had a simplified and plain English. This is what you are signing up to do. This is what we're going to use your data for. And I was actually very adamant. I had to fight lawyers to
I can imagine that.
Because they were like, well, it's all in the legalese. I'm like, but it's 3 pages long and it's all like
nobody's going to read it.
Might as well be right. And so I was adamant to put like just a short paragraph explaining what we do with your data. So I think that we need to see more of that.
Yes. No, I love it. It's, back to the values discussion. I think it's all about honesty. And honesty is about simplifying complex issues to the people so that the common human being can understand actually what it's all about, particularly when technology can be so intimidating for the masses as well. So great example. So continuing on
Can I add one more?
Yeah, please.
Sorry,
please,
one more. Because I think that's very important. And we talked about companions a bit. I think this is important because as I start to see more and more startups in this space, it's one of kind of my litmus tests for whether I would back this company or not. especially as we're building AI companions and AI friends and AI therapists and whatnot, I think it's important to think about the societal implications of all of that. And so if you're building an AI companion platform and a lot of your users are young people, you know, my son is 16, he just turned 16.
Yeah.
I don't want him to get addicted to an AI friend.
For sure.
And I think the company building these technologies should say something like, you know what, you've been spending 3 hours talking to me. It's time to go now.
It's
do
enough.
something
Time
else.
off.
It's enough. Time out.
Time out.
Exactly.
Time out, yes.
Right. Time out. Now, of course, the company's not incentivized to do that because they want to maximize engagement and monetize.
This is the attention economy, as you know well, Rana. So
exactly. But I would want to see founders who are thoughtful about that. And they're like, you know what? It's unsafe. We don't want to create the whole social media addiction all over again with AI and AI companions. And I would want to see guardrails implemented.
No, it's certainly a very good push. And again, it would be great to understand the way you could govern that in a way as an investor, as a fund, to, in a way, drive that through the founders of the companies, despite the fact it could be almost viewed as anti-economical, financial, whatever. It's a very important balance, I think, to find. Yes.
Yeah.
So coming back again to this journey you are having on humanizing AI, which is, I think, not sure it's your life journey, but it's like it looks like that to me. When designing emotionally intelligent products, what are the challenges and the way you approach those challenges when, again, you are designing or helping founders, companies to design emotionally intelligent products from both a technology standpoint, but also from a user standpoint, a user-centric view? What are the biggest challenges you've seen, you witnessed, you are the most worried about, or you want to anticipate, right, by your coaching to have this balancing act we just talked about, as with that one example you gave of attention?
Right. Yeah, I think it's really putting the human at the center. And are you giving humans agency, right? Are you amplifying kind of what a human abilities by your product? Are you augmenting human abilities as opposed to replacing humans? I think that's an important consideration. I would want to see evidence for all of the things we talked about. Trustworthiness. How are you going to build trust with the product, but also with the company behind the product? I actually think a lot of young people now, as they make decisions on which products to use, they're also thinking about the company behind it, right? What does it stand for? And so the winning, I would argue that the winning companies are going to be the companies that are the most intentional about all of that.
Right.
Transparency, trust, also a little bit of like the user experience, right? You still want that to be streamlined. I think we have not had the iPhone moment for AI yet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you agree? Yeah, not yet.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes.
So who's going to come up with an intuitive AI interface? I think that's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, so I really look forward to either reading your next book or whatever it is, Rana, to shape that kind of a playbook, right, for that ethical approach, again, humanized approach of AI. Because there's so much, I think, to
write that down.
To being researched, to be found, to be defined, because I think it's so critical to, setting the right expectation with people, humanity versus AI, and the way we're going to continue to drive innovation to the service of the people, and not the other way around. So let's shift gears and come back to something you talked about early in your life and careers, because I think it's a big topic. And coming from tech, as you know, is my background for years in a large tech company. Microsoft really knows that as a show. Diversity inclusion is certainly a big issue and remains a big issue in that industry and more broadly as well. In your book, Girls Decoded, because you've been writing books, by the way, for our listeners, so you should check that out. You talk about the unique challenges you faced as a woman and someone whose first language, cultural background that we discuss stood up predominantly in an environment which was predominantly male Western tech environments. I had actually the opportunity to have on the show someone that you may know, which is Bozoma St. John. Bozoma St. John,
Oh, of
used to be the
course.
Netflix
Boss,
CMO.
yeah.
She's also an
Yeah.
entrepreneur today, sharing expertise through the Badass Workshop. That's the name of the workshop. And she's also the author of The Urgent Life, where she shared again, there's certainly a big crucible moment of her life with the loss of her husband and what it means to her life and the urgency to live deeply and 24 by 24. And in our discussion, we spoke about how women need to own their space in leadership. And of course, for those people who don't know, actually listen who don't know Boz, so she has an African descendants, and she's working in again a very different set of industry. It's been hard actually. So how did you manage yourself to own your own space, and maybe still today? And what advice you'd give to many young women listening to the show, considering a career in tech, especially in AI today, to own their space and own the space, whatever it means for you?
I love that question. I love that question. Thank you for asking it. It took me years to own my space and to own my narrative. I mean, even when we started, Affectiva, we were kind of apologetic about talking about emotion AI, and we did.
Yes.
If you look at the early pictures of Ross Picard, my co-founder, and I, when we were pitching the company to investors, which were actually almost 100% male, older male audience.
Okay.
Yep.
That's reality.
In the early days. Especially in the early days, in 2010, when we were raising our first round of funding, I don't think we met any woman investor actually. It was later when we brought on like a more diversified investor constituent. And I remember we would avoid the word emotions. We wouldn't talk about it. And then when was it? In 2016, I just had this moment where I was like, I am going to own this story. And we rebranded the company. Our logo became Affectiva, smiley face, pink, hot pink.
Love it.
When we launched our first automotive product, we painted a car like hot pink with Affectiva on it, and it drove around Boston, kind of collecting data. And people would text me. They were like, "We just saw your hot pink car." And I just decided I hadn't at that point talked about my family at all and the challenge of moving to Boston as a single mom. And I decided to go public with that. And there's power in being vulnerable and authentic to who you are.
Oh, yes.
It was a very powerful moment. And so my advice to young women is to own your narrative. Don't be apologetic. Be unapologetic actually about your story, because every voice matters and every story matters.
Great advice, Rana. Now, moving to almost the last section of our discussion, firstly, because time is passing very fast. You're very busy as well. I want to respect your time, but I still have a few more questions. Now, I'd like to go back to the current chapter of your life, particularly with Blue Tulip. We mentioned that briefly before. Blue Tulip is a venture fund dedicated to AI for good, focusing on health, productivity, stability, and more, the people. Your baseline is we invest in human-centric AI that is good for you, good for the planet, and ethical. You invest in early-stage startups, harnessing the immense potential of AI to address humanity's most pressing challenges, from improved health, wellness, to enhance productivity, learning, and more sustainable living. So, Rana, what business, technology, and people criteria actually do you use to select such startups to invest? And what kind of societal impact, two questions in one, I know it's not fair, what kind of societal impact do you aim to achieve by selecting them?
I go back to something we talked about earlier in our conversation, the 2 Ps, marrying profit and purpose.
Yep.
I really believe, I believe this in my heart, that AI is going to create massive economic opportunity.
Yep.
And it's an and, it's not an or. And we can use AI to solve really meaningful challenges facing humanity today. And it's everything from health and wellness, like helping people become healthier and better versions of themselves, more connected, wealthier, more knowledgeable, more productive. And then our planet, like building a more sustainable world where we rethink our food systems, we rethink how we manufacture stuff, we rethink climate and energy, and harness AI, and it's really this trifecta of new sensors married with new types of data streams, multimodal data, and then of course AI in all its forms. And I think that just unlocks tremendous value, tremendous economic value, but tremendous impact as well in the world.
Yeah. No, super clear in terms of your theory of change and impact. If I may, I'd like still to double click on the people dimension, because I know that it matters to you, and I think it should matter a lot when you invest in companies, in entrepreneurs, you invest in people first. So tell me more about the way, maybe using AI, by the way, Affectiva or whatever, you assess the self-awareness, you assess the relationship management, you assess many other things, right? Which will be critical in your journey, multi-year journey with the founder of such companies. How do you pick them well?
I think often it starts with, do they have conviction about what they're doing? Like, are they passionate? I really believe that the best motivator is this intrinsic motivation. If you believe this is your, calling isn't maybe kind of a big word, but like this is the path you're on. You have deep belief, deep faith, deep conviction. I think that's important. I also look for expertise. Do you have the right to win? Do you know your stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the expertise can be both technical, so AI expertise, but also domain expertise. If you are going to solve a problem in the healthcare space, do you actually understand that domain, that industry? Or do you have, are you partnered with somebody, like as a team, do you understand that domain? And then I look for kind of an eye on, intentionality around ethics.
Ethics.
I ask questions around, where do you get your data from? And have you thought about bias? And if their answer is no, and we don't care, I'm like, I don't know if I'm the right investor. I'm not the right investor. And actually, I believe strongly if enough investors started asking these questions, the founders will pay attention.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. No, super, super interesting. And I think there's so much more, I don't know if it's science, but human science to be applied to picking the right entrepreneurs and right founders for such critical projects for society. Would you mind sharing one or a couple?
What would you look for? What would you look for?
I would look, a couple of things which would be common to you right now. Number one, I would always look for the why of the person. To me, it's always start with and you could call that your ikigai, you could call that your personal mission, depending on whatever tool you want to use. But you're super clear about the why you do what you do in your life and the way you spend your time. And to me, that's always a critical question to understand not just the IQ, but the heart, the guts, and everything aligned for the why. Then, and with that, you already, I think, have a good sense of the passion, which to me is super important, the full dedication, commitment to the mission that the person has with a project, mission, organization, startup company. and then having a real sense of, which is hard, the real sense of what will the impact success look like, really. And the way, and even if the person, and for sure will iterate many times, what are the early indicators of success of that theory of change that the founder wants to see happening in the world with that solution? What does it mean? Beyond we get into the P&Ls and the economics and the numbers, fine, we will get there. But those to me will be some key questions. Of course, the value system, super critical to me. And some of the values you mentioned are super core to my platform as well, personally. Integrity is no way out. So if you don't, you're not of my world. I don't want even to deal with you. It's part of my non-negotiable. So that'll be my list. I just want to stop because there's big enough already to make a good starting point.
I love it. I took a lot of notes. It's all here. I'm going to incorporate that into our thinking.
So
it's great.
Would you mind, before we kind of end, with a couple of questions, of course, positive leadership, because you're obviously a positive leader, right? I want to go back to that before we close. Can you give us one example beyond the auto industry example you gave, which I love? Another example of a startup that you are super excited about, using, again, that AI emotional intelligence to humanize, again, AI.
Yeah. There is a company called CareerSpan, and they build AI. They build AI career counselors, and they come from this idea that, again, not everybody has the money and even the bandwidth to pay for a career coach, somebody that can counsel you across your career journey and give you advice on what's the right role for you. And as you transition between a job and another, how do you maximize your strengths and skill sets to do something that you love, right? And they've built this AI career coach that just follows you along your career trajectory and is there to help you and support you and nudge you and mentor you and cheer you on, all the good things. And I just love that. I think that's an exciting company. That
wonderful example, and I'm sure listeners are going to check it out very quickly as well. I love to see those examples, real life examples, and because I think, like you, I guess, Rana, learning about AI is about using AI every day. I mean, somehow in your life, in your professions, in your societal role, and feel it and have a judgment based on the real usage, as opposed to, well, those guys say that, and all the headlines we hear and see everywhere in the world. Now, transitioning to the very last part on positive leadership. We often talk, of course, about leadership in terms of impact. I do that a lot. That's my bias, I must assume, on leadership or positive impact. And certainly, Rana, you've shown all of that during that interview, which has been wonderful. You are an engineer, you're an entrepreneur, a CEO, an author, an investor, a podcast host as well. By the way, listeners, you should check it out. A wonderful podcast, Pioneers of AI with Rana. Love it. It's one of my favorite podcasts now on my long list of podcasts I'm trying to get you into. And I want to ask you, how has your own emotional journey evolved across those roles as one Rana? Because you are one person, Rana. How do you deal with that? Because the emotions could be so different, right, from those different roles. And as a mom as well, by the way, which is the most important probably role in that list.
So the question is how do I integrate all these roles together?
Yeah, and the way sometimes I notice, even including myself in my life, right, at some moments where I was struggling to kind of confront the realities of me as a dad, as a husband, as a social entrepreneur, NGO, big tech company executive as well, and this and that. And I love the diversity of those roles, because this is where we learn, and we love seeing different perspectives as well, not just one. And so you've got this opportunity to see so many different diverse set of people, but sometimes it's a big pressure on our emotions and the way we react to things because of the bias we may have from that role, as opposed to this underpinning of who we are, basically.
Yeah. I tried to think about, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what is my, my dharma, what truly brings me fulfillment. And I think I haven't quite found the right words for it, but I like to think of myself as Chief Possibility Officer.
Wow. Another P, possibility.
Possibility. Exactly. Every time I create a possibility in the world, and it could be as simple as connecting person A to person B and watching the magic unfold. So create a new possibility by that, making that introduction. I feel joy, and sometimes there's absolutely nothing in it for me. It's just I'm doing it because I love doing it, and that's how I know I'm onto something, right? That's truly authentic, because it just brings me joy. So a lot of these hats, when I'm creating possibility, like the podcast. I'm creating possibility every time I'm in a new conversation with somebody. I'm learning. Hopefully the audience is learning. I'm creating a new connection with that person. With the fund, I'm always learning. Oh my goodness. I'm always meeting new amazing founders and helping them on their journeys. As a mom, I always tell my kids, my biggest role is this chief possibility officer. I'm here to help you see and create and imagine possibility. So I don't know. I think, I think that's kind of what brings it all together. But you're right in that it does take a toll. And one of my biggest lessons over the last, I'd say decade or so, is that self-care really matters.
Oh yes, it does.
It's not something I used to do. I used to be very unhealthy in the kind of my lifestyle. I didn't make time to sleep or eat well or exercise. And now I really do almost religiously, because I know that I show up better.
Absolutely.
So
it's actually, makes love the new P and this chief possibility officer in a way that it enables other people to achieve more, basically offering possibility to connect, to learn more, to open opportunities for others. So wonderful new role to create in many companies in the world, I hope. So, I had Kim Karma on the podcast. For the listeners, Kim Karma is really one of the founders of positive psychology. He's also a professor emeritus at the University of Michigan. And, he's been developing and working on positive psychology applied to organization at scale, and the way you create, you manage a positive energy across an organization. So it's really interesting. Now, it starts with the people, as you rightly said, right? It starts with all of us personally taking care of ourselves, being self-aware of who we are and who we are not, and being able to have this better understanding of the why we're here to achieve what in our life. So I'd love to also understand, you started mentioning some of that, the way you build some practices day after day, week after week, month after month, for managing your emotional self-awareness, self-care as well, and your resilience at the end of the day, and in a positive way. I know you mentioned journaling as a big practice, and I'd love you to come back to that, but tell us about a couple of other practices you built in your routines, in your habits.
Definitely journaling. I start every morning with kind of almost like a 20-minute exercise where I do affirmations. Sometimes the affirmations are like, my smile lights up the whole world. Like literally, that's how I start my affirmations. But sometimes they're specific. If I have a big event coming up or a big meeting, I will say, I'm confident. I got this. I know my stuff. So affirmations, and then I just journal. I talk about like my feelings. I try to really use it as an opportunity to process where I'm at. It's almost meditative. So that's one. And then I've been really trying to prioritize just physical fitness. When I exercise, when I do my weights training and I do my Zumba class, I'm just a happier human being. So I try to do that. I've been trying to do more Pilates and yoga, so just different exercise as well.
Some meditation as well, maybe, or
I was doing a better job meditating last year. I need to recommit to that practice, but I loved it when I did it. I mean, it's so awesome. Do you meditate?
And from time to time, not daily, but from time to time, I love to do that. Yes, and respecting your sleep, I guess, right? Which is something you mentioned as well. Super important.
Yes, sleep is super important. It's where it all starts.
So I think you're kind of answering my next question, because I'm actually very much a believer that you can manage your reservoir of positive energy in yourself. And I think everything you said is about really being self-aware that you've got that positive energy in yourself that can propagate in your mindset, which to me is very
Totally.
connected to the famous growth mindset, which is all
Hmm.
about learning, opening your minds, being curious, connecting to others, to absorb, to connect, to create relationships, to create value, empathy, and being able to propagate that positive energy. Because I think, I'm sure you share that with me, my experience, right? You meet people like you, I must say, there's a good chemistry because you feel that positivity. I don't need AI to analyze the smiles. I can feel it
Right.
when I know the
Yeah.
vibrations are, at least on my side, clear and
Same.
energizing to me after the meeting I have with you. In some of the case, we meet with people, wow, this is the country, they're toxic. It sucks your energy. I must say I have the privilege, to avoid such people. So I don't have any meeting with such people in my life because I just decided to stop having that. I'm not going to be forced by anyone to see such people. So anyway, how do you think about that positive energy, if I may, beyond all those routines? Is it something you're conscious about in the way you show up in your meetings, one-on-one, one-to-many? I got to propagate that positive energy with others today.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. Like positive energy is contagious, whether it's positive
Yep.
or negative, right? And you
Yep.
hopefully want to be putting more positive energy in the world. I almost, one of the things that I'm really working on, I call it girl embodied. Like I
Okay.
want to, because my body often knows, I sometimes test my energy after a meeting, and
Yes.
I can tell if it's like I'm built, more positive energy, or I'm deflated, right?
Yes.
And I want more of that positive energy building, and I try to clue into the signals my body is telling me. Sometimes it's, the heart racing, or are you is it butterflies or goosebumps, or I
Yeah.
just try to clue into like these signals, because I think we forgot about the body intelligence because we're so busy. We're not
Yes.
tapped
Yes.
into it.
Maybe that could be, I don't know, maybe this is actually one of those next frontiers for AI emotions. Because my Oura ring doesn't give me any positive energy index where I
Right.
am.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah,
maybe it's
exactly.
something we should think about. Very complex, I think, but when you connect all the all the incredible improvements happening in terms of AI vision, AI emotions, voice, and all the rest, and of course also all the words we use in our lives, written and so on. There's so much texture of
Hmm.
who we are there. And it might be, who knows, with some great innovation, a way to capture the positive energy somewhere. Who knows? Let's
Yeah,
see
I
that.
like that. Somebody's building a company that's doing
Yeah,
that. Let us
maybe.
know.
So, Ryan, this is really a wrap up now question I love to ask often to my guests, and you've been very patient and wonderful, opening always clearly your life and your journey. For the listeners, many of our listeners who are just beginning their journey, either in technology, impact entrepreneurship, or who just basically want to have an impact, right, positive impact in the world, what is one bold yet practical step that they can take today, you think, to connect their passion for that positive impact, that innovation, with a genuine desire again to change the world for a better world? What is that first bold step they should take right now?
Honestly, embarking on the journey, like taking the step, making an ask. I don't, like the simplest, smallest step gets you on the journey. Um, and that's all it
Start,
takes. You just
just
start
start
it.
moving. Get on your journey
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Get
Don't
on the
wait for
journey,
anyone
right?
to, no, don't wait for anyone to invite you to a journey. Create
Exactly.
your
And
own
you don't
journey.
have to create your own journey. I love it.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, Rana, I'm afraid this is now really the end, so I'm going to wrap up. It's been a wonderful, incredible conversation. I enjoyed so much, and so many more questions I could ask you. I'm sure our listeners would ask you as well, maybe on the comments on the post when we'll release the episode as well. So your journey is not just inspiring, but I think it's just a powerful reminder that AI is about people first. That's my view. I think it's your view as well, and should be,
Absolutely.
again, at the service of people and the planet together as well. So for listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, as you know, I would always appreciate that you leave a great review with 5 stars if you can. That would be wonderful. On the Apple Podcasts or Spotify, your favorite platform. Stay tuned to our next episode next 2 weeks. As you know, every couple of weeks, where we'll continue to explore positive leadership in action with more incredible guests. So Rana, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your incredible positive energy, your uplifting mindset. They will stay with us throughout the rest of the day, wherever you live in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a true pleasure.